What if the most powerful weapon of the Middle Ages wasn't a sword, a castle, or even gunpowder, but a living flying creature the size of a cathedral? Imagine the year is 1250. Knights in steel armor line up beneath castle walls. Longbowmen prepare volleys. Siege towers roll forward. A shadow passes overhead. Wings wider than a ship's mast. A roar louder than a battlefield charge. A dragon. Now let's treat this seriously. Not magic, not myth, but biology in a hypothetical scenario. Let's assume dragons are real organisms placed into a realistic, high medieval world between 1200 and 1400. How would warfare change? A plausible medieval dragon might measure 12 to 25 meters long. That's up to 80 feet from snout to tail. Wingspan? 20 to 35 meters. For comparison, the largest known flying animal in history, Quetzalcoatlus, had a wingspan of only about 10 to 11 meters. A dragon would be triple that. Weight? Perhaps 8 to 25 tons. That's like 4 African elephants. Flight speed? Up to 150 kilometers per hour. Operational ceiling? Several thousand meters, high enough to observe entire armies. And fire? If biological, it could function like a massively scaled bombardier beetle, expelling flammable chemicals ignited upon release. Medieval warfare revolved around sieges. Castles were nearly impossible to take quickly. Months of starvation, disease, supply shortages. Now introduce a dragon. Wooden gates? Burned in minutes. Siege engines? Destroyed from above. Thatched rooftops inside city walls? Instant infernos. Stone walls wouldn't melt. But medieval cities were full of timber construction. One dragon could accomplish what once took an army months. Aerial siege platforms didn't exist in the 13th century. Dragons would be the world's first air force. On an open field, the impact would be worse. Imagine heavy cavalry charging. Now imagine a dragon diving at 120 kilometers per hour. Horses panic at unfamiliar predators. Formations break instantly. Infantry depends on cohesion. Shield walls rely on discipline. But discipline shatters under fire from above. The psychological effect would rival the terror of war elephants in ancient battles. Except elephants don't fly. 3 to 5 strafing passes. That's all it might take. An entire medieval army could rout without sustained combat. Perhaps the greatest advantage wouldn't even be fire. It would be vision. From 2,000 meters up, a dragon rider could observe troop movements 20 to 30 kilometers away. In medieval warfare, intelligence was slow. Messengers on horseback, signal fires, scouts climbing hills. A dragon eliminates uncertainty. It becomes a reconnaissance platform, a rapid communication system, a mobile command center. The kingdom that controls the sky controls the map. Dragons wouldn't just attack armies, they would attack infrastructure. Burn supply depots, destroy harvest fields, ignite farmland before winter. Medieval economies were fragile. A single burned harvest could mean famine. Dragons could weaponize starvation. This mirrors later scorched earth strategies, centuries before they historically emerged. Now imagine thick scaled hide, 3 to 5 centimeters of keratinized armor. Arrows would struggle to penetrate. Only vulnerable points: eyes, wing membranes, underbelly. Crossbows might wound. But killing a 20-ton flying predator? Not easy. Early gunpowder weapons existed by the late medieval period. Primitive bombards and cannons, but accuracy was limited. At least initially, dragons would dominate. The greatest power of dragons wouldn't be fire, it would be belief. Medieval societies were deeply religious. A dragon appearing in the sky could be interpreted as divine punishment, an omen, a curse. Morale doesn't just break from physical danger, it collapses from spiritual terror. Mass desertion, panic, confession before battle. In psychological terms, dragons would be superweapons. Now reality sets in. A 20-ton carnivore must eat, at minimum 100 to 200 kilograms of meat per day. That requires enormous territory, royal-scale feeding operations. Only the wealthiest kingdoms could support even one, maybe 2 or 3 at most. And wings? Wings are fragile. Concentrated arrow volleys could tear membranes. Heavy crossbows could punch through. Ballista bolts, used by advanced city-states, could critically wound. And weather matters. High winds reduce maneuverability. Rain interferes with fire projection. If dragons were reptilian and cold-blooded northern winters would limit activity. Operational season might shrink dramatically. History shows a pattern. Every dominant weapon inspires a counter. Knights dominated until longbows. Castles dominated until cannons. If dragons existed in the 12th century, they would likely dominate for several decades. But eventually, artillery improves. Cannons fire iron shot with penetrating force. Fortified stone roofing becomes standard. Anti-air tactics develop. By the late medieval period, concentrated gunpowder artillery would likely neutralize dragons as strategic assets, much like early tanks in World War I, terrifying at first, then countered. Strategic conclusion. In a medieval context, dragons would function as an air force, a strategic bomber, a reconnaissance system, a psychological superweapon. For perhaps 50 years, kingdoms possessing dragons would achieve regional supremacy. But like all weapons in history, dominance would not last forever. Technology adapts, tactics evolve, and even the mightiest predator becomes vulnerable. So the real question isn't, would dragons win wars? It's this: how long would humanity need to learn how to kill one? Because history shows one thing clearly: no weapon remains unstoppable, not even one with wings.